Hello again and welcome to Employment Hour in 30. I'm John Scholes. He is Lior Samfiru. We talk about employment rights on this show and get to a ton of stuff. Actually, this show we're going to be talking about long-term disability rights as well. Your partner, Tumarkin, will be here talking about that later on after we get to a bunch of things before that. I will tell you right off the top, the contact is super simple. It is help@employmentlawyer.ca. You have the phone number 1-855-821-5900 as well. We like to start the show with the week that was, something that has come across your desk in the office that would be of interest to basically to everybody that has a job, right?
Well, generally the week actually was filled with people reaching out to me that heard the show or saw the show, right, and wanted me to know that it triggered something in them, that it reminded them of an issue that they were having before, and some of them said, oh, I wish I would have heard you 2 years ago when I had that problem. Well, the good news is if you're watching us right now, you're going to get informed, you're going to get educated about your workplace rights, you're going to know what you're owed, what you can and cannot do if you're faced with a workplace problem. So that's why it's so important. You know, there's not so many misconceptions out there. This show was born out of the idea of misconceptions about workplace rights. So that's what we're here every time to talk and tell people the way it actually is, what the law says. There's very good employment rights that applies to employees and employers, but you need to know what those are, and that's what we're here talking about. And I always like to start off by talking about a scenario that came across my desk. I spoke with a young lady who recently got into a bit of I guess, an argument with her boss. She worked at a retail store, and what happened is she thought she got approved to take a vacation. I guess the boss thought she wasn't taking a vacation. Bottom line is she went on vacation when she wasn't approved. Fine. It wasn't that big a deal, except when she came back, her employer stopped scheduling her for shifts. Her boss no longer scheduled her for shifts. She would be scheduled 1 week in advance, always for shifts. She would work 3-4 shifts a week in this retail store, and she was no longer scheduled. Now, she called her boss and said, well, am I being fired? Am I being terminated? No, we'll let you know when we have shifts for you. And that had been going on for about 3 weeks before she finally called me, and she wanted to know, well, what does this mean? I'm not fired, but I have a job, but I'm not working. They're not scheduling me shifts. So what does this mean? Well, John, if you're not working, if the company doesn't give you work, that's a termination. You have been let go. The most basic concept of employment law is very simple. I go to work, you give me work, I get paid for my work, and I go home. Well, if you're not going to give me work, if you're not going to schedule me for shifts, you fired me. The relationship is ended. There's no more work. So a company cannot avoid calling it a termination. A company cannot avoid paying severance just by saying, well, we just didn't schedule you for shifts. It's one thing if, okay, on a particular shift you didn't get scheduled because maybe something happened. But for a few weeks not to get any shifts? Nonsense. So I want our viewers to understand that if your employer all of a sudden is not scheduling you, it's exactly the same as them saying you're out of a job. And that's important because you then are owed severance. A company cannot avoid paying you severance by saying it's not a termination, it's just a scheduling issue. Let's be serious. If you don't get scheduled, if you don't make money, if you're not going to work anymore, you are owed severance, and anything less than that is wrong and it's illegal.
It basically sounds like, without saying it, it's a temporary layoff.
It's exactly what it sounds like. Which is illegal. So a temporary layoff, for those that may not have seen our show before, is a situation where the company is saying, we're not letting you go. We're maybe slow right now. So we're
put you on ice for a while.
Yeah, send you home for a few weeks, a few months, and we'll call you back. Well, guess what? The company's not allowed to do that either. That's a termination as well. You have a right to treat a temporary layoff as a termination. Again, a company can't avoid its legal obligations by calling something a creative name or by saying that something is a layoff or it's a scheduling issue. The law, again, is smarter than that.
EmploymentHourTV.ca, that is the place you want to go to find out where you can catch our live radio show that's been going on for over half a decade now. We take a ton of phone calls on the show, and we like to play them back on this show to get some feedback.
My girlfriend, she was let go. She's been in a management position with them for 12 years. And what happened is she took an item that was meant as a gift for purchase for customers who buy stuff from the store, something that was going to be given away with no dollar value anyways. It's a practice they've always had, and they've always been allowed to take something. And now all of a sudden, they claim that the process changed, but they never informed her. And they let her go, and they said it was with cause.
I remember that phone call.
Yeah, I remember that as well. And it's very simple, John. It really comes down to whether whatever this person did is bad enough to be cause. Now, let's face it, if she's doing something that she doesn't know to be wrong, she's not stealing, she's just doing something she thought she was allowed to do legitimately, well, then it's not only is it not cause, it's probably not even misconduct. The company can't just change its policies without telling the employees. A policy doesn't do the company any good unless it's communicated to the employees. And even, you know what, John, even if it was a breach of policy, it's still not cause. Remember, cause is reserved for the worst offenders. So you only can be terminated for cause if whatever it is that you did is so bad that the company can't conceive of continuing to employ you. So no, this person is no cause. I remember telling that person the same thing. They've been wrongfully dismissed. And what happens when you're wrongfully dismissed, and by the way, this happens often when a company jumps the gun and terminates for cause before it should, well, you're owed your full severance. There's no discount that the company gets. So let's talk about what that amount is. And what I've done is I've taken that information and I plugged it into the severancepaycalculator.com website. So you can see on your screen right now, middle manager position, 12 years of employment. Let's say this person is in their 40s. Well, the severance that they're owed is 16 to 18 months of pay potentially, up to 18 months of pay. So not only is it not cause, they're owed potentially as much as a year and a half of pay. What you're looking at is a printout or a slide from the severancepaycalculator.com website. We'll talk about that in a second. So no, if you've done something, but it really wasn't that bad, you didn't know that what you were doing is wrong, the company really didn't properly deal with it, they jumped the gun and they let you go all of a sudden, that's a wrongful dismissal, that's illegal, and you're owed compensation.
1-855-821-5900, the number to get a hold of Lior and his team, and help at employmentlawyer.ca. Again, employmenthourtv.ca is where we get our phone calls from, because we take them from our live 1-hour radio show, which has been happening for many, many years. A lot of resources, a lot of people come getting their problems solved. I want to get to a couple more calls.
My wife just recently started a new job, a very senior position, but she has a probation period of about 6 months. She also just got pregnant, so we're expecting our first child. Just wanted to know if she notified the employer within that 6-month period, probation period, would they be able to terminate her based on probation ground reasons because of her pregnancy?
Don't mess with mama.
Yeah,
don't mess with mama.
You do not mess with mama. Probation or not. Yeah. Let's be very clear. A company cannot, under any circumstances, let an employee go because that employee is pregnant, because the employee is going to take a pregnancy or parental leave. Cannot do that. Doesn't matter if the employee is on probation. A company can't say, well, you're on probation, therefore we're letting you go. If the reason even has a part or something to do with the pregnancy, it's illegal. Now, is it possible that the reason that the person would be let go is completely unrelated to the pregnancy? I guess it's possible. Good luck proving that if you're the employer. So what I would say to this employer, absolutely do not fire this person, whether they're on probation or not. And what I would say to the employee, if the company does try to let you go, saying you're on probation, I don't care. I don't care that you're on probation. Call me, because potentially that's a human rights violation. That's a violation of the Employment Standards Act. That's a wrongful dismissal. It's a whole bowl of wrong, as you like to say, John. Right. It's illegal. You can't do that. I want to talk to you in that situation.
We'll get to one more phone call before we get to another resource you can use. That is terminationquestions.com.
I'm with a job that I absolutely love. I've been there for 6 years. I'm actually one of their top producers in sales. I have been hired when I first started on a commission base only. They told us 2 weeks ago they're changing our pay structure to $30,000 a year, a little bit for gas, and hardly anything for commission. I'm going to be losing almost $30,000 a year. What are my rights? If I quit to find another job, am I allowed severance because they've changed my pay structure?
Yeah, I like the smell of that one.
That is a very bad change. And this happens very often with commission salespeople, where the company changes either the commission structure or the amount of commission, and the company does not have a right to do that, because it's a change to your pay. And if you're going to be in a situation where you're making a certain commission, now you're going to make less money, or even if the company thinks they're helping you out, they're going to give you some sort of a guarantee by way of a salary, they can't do that. If you're on 100% commission, they can't change that. If you're on a commission and salary, they can't put you on 100% commission. And certainly in this situation, she says she's going to lose about $30,000. That's a huge change. Yeah. So what does this mean? If she's going to be treat it that way. If her terms of employment are going to change, she's going to make less money in this situation, she's allowed to treat that as a constructive dismissal. So if she does quit because of that, yes, of course she's owed severance. She's not quitting because she doesn't want to work there. She said she loved her job. She's not quitting because she doesn't like her boss. She's quitting because of the fact that they changed the terms of employment. And if you quit because of that, again, as long as it's a significant change, you're owed severance. It's a constructive dismissal. Now, the words of advice, I always say this on the show with a constructive dismissal, do not quit. Please, please, do not quit before you speak to me first. We want to do this right. We want to properly paper it. We want to make sure that we maximize the amount of compensation that you're going to get. But yeah, she was certainly constructively dismissed in this situation.
Help@employmentlawyer.ca is the email, 1-855-821-5900, the number to get a hold of Lior anytime. And I mentioned it a moment ago, terminationquestions.com. This is where you can go, a website, put in whatever question you have about your job, your employment, your boss, and Lior, one of his team, will get back to you and answer that question. Terminationquestions.com. One right here says, I was let go after an employee said that I harassed him. So that's not true, and the company didn't do any investigation. I was never even asked about it. They said I'm not owed any severance, but I don't think it's fair.
Well, it doesn't seem fair, does it? Certainly. When a company is faced with a harassment allegation, they have to investigate. They have to dot their I's, cross their T's, and make sure they know what actually happened. And that involves talking with the person that's being accused. How can you do proper investigation without getting everyone's side of the story? So it's an improper investigation, which tells me that the company probably did not do what it was supposed to, and they let this person go without having all the facts. Now, the fact that he harassed someone is a bad thing. Don't get me wrong, if that were the case. But that doesn't necessarily automatically mean that he could be let go for cause. There's harassment and then there's harassment. Yeah. So no, a company should properly investigate. If the company didn't, he needs to give me a call. That certainly sounds like a wrongful dismissal. And if you are going to be someone that's going to be dealing with a harassment situation, whether you're the one complaining or the one that's being complained against, you have the right to make sure that there's a proper investigation. Company cannot jump to conclusions. The company can make its mind. It certainly can't ignore it. But the company should investigate, and if it doesn't investigate properly, there could be legal repercussions.
How about an unpaid suspension? Sometimes that comes along with, right?
Generally speaking, an unpaid suspension is something a company cannot do. Okay, an unpaid suspension is a constructive dismissal. Usually a company can suspend with pay. If you're put in an unpaid suspension, you may be able to treat that as a constructive dismissal, but before you do, I want you to call me.
Knowing all about your long-term disability rights and the Severance Pay Calculator are to come. Stick around, 1-855-821-5900. And help@employmentlawyer.ca. Lots more Employment Hour in 30 coming up.
Lost your job? Employment law myth number 7.
Involving an employment lawyer is expensive.
Fact. In most cases, fees are nominal, and the employer will ultimately cover the fees. Always go to employmentlawyer.ca and check with the employment lawyer first. Lost your job? Find out how much severance you're owed right now. SeverancePayCalculator.com. Accurate, anonymous, and free. SeverancePayCalculator.com. Lost your job? Employment law myth number 5.
There's no point in calling a lawyer because my employer treated me fairly.
Fact. Over 90% of people are offered much less than they are owed. Always go to employmentlawyer.ca and check with the employment lawyer first.
And welcome back to Employment Hour in 30. You want to get a hold of Lior and the team anytime, 1-855-821-5900, help@employmentlawyer.ca as well. This is an important tool we like to talk about every week because, quite frankly, people use it more and more every week. We're over 500,000 people checking in on the Severance Pay Calculator to find out exactly what the straight goods is when it comes to their severance. SeverancePayCalculator.com.
John, even though we've been doing this show for a while now, there's people watching us for the first time. Every week, every time we're on air, people watch us for the first time. They catch it, and they want to know what this is about. So it's that important for me to talk about the Severance Pay Calculator, because you may not have heard about it before. And even if you have heard about it, you may need a bit of a refresher. SeverancePayCalculator.com. Again, SeverancePayCalculator.com. The name kind of says it all. Yep. It helps you find out and determine and calculate how much you are owed. It sounds much more complicated than it is, because the only thing that you need to do is answer a couple of questions about your age, your position, and the length of employment. And that's it. You find out how much the law says you should get by way of severance. And it's not a week per year. It's not 2 weeks per year. It's not 3 weeks per year. For most people, it's a lot more than that. So go to severancepaycalculator.com right now. Even if you are not losing your job, maybe you're concerned or you're curious, you want to know, it's easy to use. It takes seconds. It's anonymous. It's completely free. There's no strings attached. It's just there for your information. So the very first place you go to, if you lost your job, you're staring at that severance letter. You're trying to make sense of it. What does this mean? There's a deadline there. Should I accept? Should I not? Go to severancepaycalculator.com, find out what you're owed, and if you want to, only if you want to, there's a contact button right there you can use to call me or to contact me directly so that I can help you get what you're owed.
You know, we can talk about it all day and praise it, but let's put it in a real-life example, so we'll get to one now. Mina, 48, worked in a senior management at a large company for 9 years. Without reason, she was fired and offered 17 weeks, count them, 17 weeks of severance pay. The Ministry of Labor, told her that the offer is acceptable. Of course they did, according to the laws. However, the severance pay calculator told her she is owed much more. Who's right? I ask.
And this is a very important question, and a lot of people have the same issue. A lot of people would contact the Ministry of Labor if they lost their job. It seems like the natural thing to do. The problem is, and we've talked about this on the show, but it can't be overemphasized. The Ministry of Labor, the Labor Board, can only advise you about your minimum entitlements. Your minimum entitlements. There's a small fraction of what you're actually owed. So no, you cannot get advice about losing your job from the Ministry of Labor. You can contact them about overtime, about vacation pay. You can contact them about the holiday pay. You cannot and should not ever contact the Ministry of Labor if you lost your job to find out what you're owed. So who's right? The severance pay calculator is right. So let's actually put that to use, and let's put this information into the severance pay calculator. So she was in a senior position, 9 years of service, 48 years old. Well, the Ministry of Labor told her 17 weeks. Well, the real amount, as the severance pay calculator shows, it's 12 to 15 months. You can see that on the screen right now. What a difference. 17 weeks is about, I don't know, 4 months. So at a minimum, she's looking at a year's pay, 3 times more. Hopefully that makes the point as to why the severancepaycalculator.com tool is so important. Check it out. Have that information. Don't do the wrong thing. Don't accept less than you're owed. Once you've accepted it, you can't do anything. You're stuck.
Our live 1-hour radio show can be reached by going to employmenthourtv.ca to find out a station that will carry it near you. You can even call in on that radio show and get your questions answered that way as well. Let's play another call from the show. I'll get you to expand on it, pal.
Okay, I'm actually calling for a friend. She worked for this company for a little over a year as a food sample host. They would call her and tell her which store to go to and which food samples she was going to be giving to the customers. 2 to 3 days a week. Last month, she worked 6 straight days for them. They would send her back a check. Deductions were her responsibility. A couple of weeks ago, they called her. They're downsizing. They no longer need her services. And because she was an independent contractor, she's not entitled to any severance. What's your take on that?
But was she?
Well, that's the question. The question is she an independent contractor? Well, she doesn't really look like one, does she? She's been there for over a year, works consistently for them. They tell her where to go, when to leave. They give her all the tools to do the job, and she does what she's told, and then she goes home. So she's not an independent contractor. She's one of two things. She's either an employee, or she may be the in-between category, which is what we call a dependent contractor. A dependent contractor is someone that's not quite an employee, but they're certainly not an independent contractor. They rely on a company. They may do other stuff on the side, but they're still related and connected enough to the company that they're not an independent contractor. Now, why is that important? Because employees and dependent contractors both get severance. And that's the key here. Whereas an independent contractor, you can say, don't come in anymore. We don't owe you anything. Whereas a dependent contractor and certainly an employee is owed severance. So one of those situations applies to her. She's either a dependent contractor or an employee. So if she's been let go and she hasn't been paid severance, she's been wrongfully dismissed. So she should give me a call. We should talk about what she's actually owed. I want to find out more information about her. But many of our viewers may find themselves in that situation, misclassified as independent contractors when they're really either employees or potentially dependent contractors.
And that could get them into a lot of trouble with the tax man and all kinds of different angles too, right?
Because what happens if you believe you're an independent contractor? You may say, okay, well, I'm an independent contractor, so let me deduct my gas, my mortgage, my kids' education. Right. Well, if you're not really an independent contractor and you're getting these deductions, if it's CRA ever audits you, they'll say, well, wait a second, not so fast. You're not an independent contractor, so you owe us taxes, you owe penalties and fines, a bad situation to be in. So you don't want to be misclassified. If you're an employee, you should call yourself an employee. And if you're a company and you have people working for you at your premises, you tell them what to do. Treat them like the employees that they are. Don't try to avoid your obligations and save money by misclassifying them.
Help at employmentlawyer.ca is the email, and 1-855-821-5900. We'll take a short break. Knowing your long-term disability rights, that is coming up with your partner of the firm right here on Employment Hour in 30.
Lost your job? Employment law myth number 5.
There's no point in calling a lawyer because my employer treated me fairly.
Fact, over 90% of people are offered much less than they are owed. Always go to employmentlawyer.ca and check with the employment lawyer first. Lost your job? Find out how much severance you're owed right now. SeverancePayCalculator.com. Accurate, anonymous, and free. SeverancePayCalculator.com. Lost your job? Employment law myth number 9.
I can just call the labor board instead of a lawyer.
Fact, the labor board cannot help an employee get their full entitlements. Always go to employmentlawyer.ca and check with the employment lawyer first.
Hey, welcome back to Employment Hour in 30. I'm John Scholes. He's Lior Samfiru. You know, the other half of what you guys do, it's an amazing 1-2 punch in your firm because you deal with employment rights and you'll deal with injury and disability and long-term disability. Those sometimes go hand in hand with situations, right?
They often go hand in hand. I often speak to people who lost their job or are worried about losing their job because they can't work.
Yes.
And while they're not working, they're getting paid by an insurance company. And then the insurance company says, we think you should go back to work, even though they haven't been cleared. So we're able to help on both sides. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to bring in my partner, Severance Tumarkin, and talk about how do we deal with these insurance companies? How do we solve those problems so that people actually can get the coverage that they paid for?
Sevan, welcome back, brother.
Thanks.
And talk a little bit about that. Expand on what Lior said about what you do.
Well, that's very, very true. I mean, we have a lot of people who have been cut off or denied long-term disability, and, you know, they think that they have no rights, or they think that it's just too difficult to take on the insurance company, and, you know, it couldn't be further than the truth. Insurance companies, I say it over and over and over, are in the business of making money, and one of the ways they do that is by denying claims, many of which are legitimate. And so what we do is we hit back. It's just that simple. We bring them to the table, to the negotiating table, and they end up paying settlements, they end up paying money that otherwise our clients would have seen. And you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we see it every week, every month. We see it all the time.
And it's, you know, you quite often say on your show, the Insurance and Injury Law Show, that they're not difficult to resolve either. Everybody thinks it's going to be something out of a Hollywood movie. That's just not the case.
It's not the case. And, you know, I'm talking not only as someone who is representing a lot of these individuals, but as someone who worked for the insurance companies.
Right.
And I can tell you, insurance companies, whenever they have to hire a lawyer to deal with one of these claims, they are bleeding money. They don't want it. I used to get calls in my office almost every day. When are you resolving this file or this file? We don't want to have to pay you. So they are interested in actually resolving these disputes. The thing is this, if they're denying 10 people out there, they're expecting that 9 people will simply walk away. And this one person that eventually fights back, they'll end up paying them, but then they're making money on all the other people. And so our job is to educate people, to let them know you have rights. If your doctors are telling you that you are disabled, that you can't go back to work, the insurance company should not be taking the opposite view and making your life miserable and re-victimizing you.
Right. Good way to get a hold of Savannah at the firm, by the way, is help at theinsurancelawyer.ca or 1-855-821-5900. We do get calls on the Employment Hour radio show, of course, about employment, but we get calls about disability and that as well, long-term disability calls. So we'd like to bleed them into this show and let you comment on those, Savannah. We'll get to a call now.
I was on LTD for 2.5, 3 years. My insurance cut me off. I had a strong medical report from a specialist saying, you know, I still need to be off, but they just cut me off completely. At that time, I also got a letter from my employer saying that I'm going to be considered AWOL if I don't go back. I didn't know what to do. Anyways, I went back, and I've been there actually now for just over a year. And I'm just wondering if I still have any recourse with insurance or with my employer.
Wow.
We see this all the time, John, and this is the unique aspect of our firm that we can deal both with the employment and the insurance aspects of an individual like this. And I'll tell you this, the problem that I see here is that the person is now going back to work, potentially against doctor's advice, their situation, their health condition is probably going to deteriorate. They're going to self-destruct. They don't have to do that. We tell people as soon as you are either denied or cut off disability, or as soon as you are told that that's going to happen. Remember, insurance companies are not going to tell you you've been denied or cut off last week. They're going to give you a heads up. Give us a call or contact us when you get that, or even before that if you think that they're about to cut you off, because we can often intervene and either avoid the cutoff or resolve the dispute shortly after. It's really not as difficult as people think.
A resource as well, mydisabilityquestions.com, much like we do with you, Lior. You can ask those questions there, and a member of Severance team will get back to you and answer them. I want to read one out, and I know you want to comment on it. Severance says, again, mydisabilityquestions.com. My brother James was diagnosed with a psychiatric issue last year. He got short-term disability, but then the same insurer denied him long-term because they say he is not totally disabled. That's what they said. I don't understand how they can approve one but not the other.
Well, John, there are a lot of inconsistencies in the way that insurance companies work. And again, that's why we do what we do, because people get hit with that. They have no idea what to do. And again, they assume that they can't do anything, they have no rights. So what this gentleman is writing actually makes complete sense. I mean, the test for short-term disability or long-term is often very similar. And here you have the same insurance company. Right. So I'll tell you, in these kinds of instances, we approach this in a very logical and methodical manner. We want to see all the medical documentation, the denial letters, and we get in touch with the insurance companies. You see, once we get involved, the person is no longer dealing with these adjusters. No more phone calls, no more emails, no more letters. We are the ones who stand between the individual and the insurance companies. We push back and we bring them to the table, and that always ends up in a resolution.
Let me ask something, Sivan. So we played a call first just a couple moments ago, and that person didn't know what you said, that he could have fought the insurance company and he could have gotten them to deal with him. He went back to work and he worked for a year, and in the meantime he realizes he can't do it. What does he do a year later? Now he's back at work. Now he can't work anymore. He realized he probably shouldn't have gone back to work a year before. What does he do now?
Oftentimes in these insurance policies, they have what's called a recurrence clause, which allows them generally up to 6 months. So in this case, it would be more than that, to go back on claim or to reapply. Now, in this case, this individual obviously went back after he was denied. I would tell you that the fact that he tried to go back because of this denial and has not been able to now sustain that work now strengthens his claim for the initial denial, meaning he can fight back now. We can actually help him. And the proof, as they say, is in the pudding, right? Because he has not been able to go back. So now we even have the employer confirming that he's unable to work because of his disability.
You often say that it's often good to try to mitigate and go back to work, so it looks good on him, correct?
Yes, it looks absolutely good from an insurance standpoint.
But the other thing I wanted to say, and with that call that we had, is so the employer finds out that the insurance company is saying, okay, you're being cut off, and they say, well, you have to come back to work. But those should be separate things completely. If your insurance cuts you off, right or wrong, as long as your doctor says you can't work, the company cannot make you go back. The company can't rely on what the insurance company says. And if they try to make you, if they let you go, if they threaten that you will be considered to have resigned, that could be a human rights violation. The company should only care about what your doctor says, not what the insurance company says.
I think I got time for one more quick one here, Sivan. Again, mydisabilityquestions.com says, how long will it take for my case to work through the court system? I was just cut off LTD after 2 years on the nose and don't want to take years to resolve this issue.
You know, John, it's a good question because it's very common for people to be concerned that once they start the legal process, from what you see on TV and what you hear from other lawyers, it's going to take years and years and years. That's not the reality when it comes to these kinds of claims. We've had situations where someone was told that in 2 months or 3 months they're going to be cut off, and we've resolved the claim within that time period. Nice. So it can be a few weeks, it can be a few months. Does it, do you have situations where it can last longer? It could. It depends on the circumstance. But the vast majority of them get resolved fairly quickly and with so much money coming to our clients that otherwise they would not have seen a cent of. That's what's staggering here. It's that the insurance companies are literally playing this numbers game, hoping that you will walk away and not challenge them.
It's the same with employment. Its resolution is quick.
It is. People oftentimes are afraid of the process. Whether it's a disability issue, whether it's an employment wrongful dismissal, they're afraid of the process. No one wants to be engaged in litigation and court battles. Here's the thing about employment. The same thing applies to disability. First of all, it's rare that they ever see a court. 98, 99% resolve before you are 100 feet from a courtroom. And they usually don't take long to resolve. It's not a overly confrontational process. So please don't be afraid of the legal process. Don't let that stand in your way from enforcing your rights, whether it's a disability issue or an employment issue.
It's about rights and money you should have. That you're owed.
That's the thing. You're owed.
Right.
This is not something. You're not trying to scam the system. You are owed this money.
Right. A couple ways to contact Lior and Savannah as we wrap it up here. Help at theinsurancelawyer.ca and then help at employmentlawyer.ca as well. The phone number is the same, 1-855-821-5900. And always, always, always check out severancepaycalculator.com. Find out what you are owed as far as your severance is concerned. Thanks for hanging with us. Join us next time right here on Employment Hour in 30.
Closed captioning of this program is brought to you in part by SeverancePayCalculator.com. Find out how much you are owed right now. SeverancePayCalculator.com.